Alina, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast this evening or this morning, I think for you, or midday. But yeah, really excited to. I think I was saying off camera, I have a lot of orders on that, delve into true crime, kind of come from more of an academic perspective. But I think it's a really special podcast when you get someone with so much lived experience, so much knowledge, such a discerning eye that can really spot that kind of minutia that would crack a case, technically. So I suppose maybe for the listeners that don't know you, I know there's a big kind of true crime following. We have other guests on as well. So maybe for anyone that's kind of maybe unaware, just give it maybe a bit of background info on who you are.
Sure. So, born and raised in the Orlando, Florida area, and that's where I ultimately went to college for criminal justice and communications, and then got involved in crime scene investigation and did a lot of public speaking events. I taught college forensic science topics. And when I was doing a public speaking presentation, I got scouted, and somebody said, "Hey, do you want to do a TV show?" And I'd never really thought about it before, but I thought, teaching is one of my passions, and giving people the skills, the critical thinking that they need to examine things. And so I thought, well, that's a way to reach a broader audience. So yeah, why not? Which, if you know me, I am an introvert. So the first question that everybody asks is, how did an introvert end up with a TV show? And yeah, I don't know. It just happened.
But you're all like, from everything I've seen on the show and stuff, you're also an empath, and I think an empath is like it's trying to understand, it's trying to do good, I'd say, nearly, and like, what better way to do good than have a big show which I think brings awareness to cases, but not only. But like teaches people, like, if I can see something like that, I would, maybe crime scene investigation would be something completely out, like the technical or the scientific element of it would be completely out of my purview. But then I see something on the show, then maybe something happens in life where it sparks, and like you could actually have an impact maybe on a case. You might remember something better or that. So I think the empath probably is maybe outweighing the introvert in this case.
Yeah, they probably do battle fairly frequently. Certainly being an empath in this career field has been an experience to try to make sure that I maintain my own well-being while doing this, because for anybody that doesn't know what an empath is, it's basically somebody that saw something the other day that explained it, and it said it's a privilege to see a battle and decide whether or not you want to participate. Empathy is knowing that if somebody else is battling, you already are.
Yeah.
And I kind of loved that. It sums it up in a nutshell. So, you can see injustice and go, oh, that's terrible. When I see injustice, I feel it, and I feel like I have to do something about this. I have to do something. And I don't really feel like I have a choice. If somebody's hurting, from whatever, and there's a lot of hurt and grief and emotions that are attached to crime. So that kind of became, my thing. And a lot of people view empathy as it's a terrible burden. And I will say, I've said it's either the best gift ever or the biggest curse, and some days it changes from one to the other. But I think we have to view it as a superpower, because empathy was what ultimately, in that career field, while it's difficult, led me to be able to kind of slip into that mindset of both the victim and the suspect. So it is a bit dark to be able to kind of feel or understand why the suspect is doing what they're doing, but it's completely relevant to an investigation. I have to know, why did they choose a victim that they did, or how did they pick a house, or how would they enter? And I would have to understand the victim to know, would they have fought? Would they have run? All of the different, kind of parts of a crime scene. So empathy has been, I will say, my superpower.
Yeah, and just, like, do you know what's sparking there in my head? I'm not sure if you ever watched the show Hannibal. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, like, and that is like, it's the most perfect example of the empath versus the psychopath. Where I can't remember his name. He's the guy with the glasses. but he is a crazy empath, like where he can almost like revisualize the crime scenes because he has such a kind of deep connection with his empathy is so it's like what you said, a superpower. And then he's going up against Hannibal, who is like the almost the archetypical psychopath, high IQ, very intelligent, so calm. And we get to see like this kind of forces of good versus the forces of evil. It's such a fascinating uh, kind of archetype or kind of mythology nearly that you see throughout all ancient texts. It's like this kind of good or this light against this darkness, which is kind of evil. But it's so interesting because I think it is a superpower. Most people will go through life, I think, cognitively understanding things. And it's like what you said there. You actually feel it on a visceral level. Like I can hear of some atrocity probably in some country and think, oh, that's awful on a very cognitive level. But I think there's a difference when someone might like feel it viscerally and then like, because feelings is what motivate, behavior. Like cognition doesn't motivate behavior to the same extent. So if you're feeling, these like powerful emotions, like yeah, there's a level I think of a motivation that people that are cognitively experiencing things that will not get.
Absolutely. It's like I describe it as being like the big sister to the entire world. Right? Like you can make fun of your brother, but if somebody else does, then you rise up and you're like, no, 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 not on my watch. And that's how I felt about everything is, not on my watch. I want to, that's why I got into crime scene was really, you can hear about atrocities or you can choose to take control and do something about them. And, a lot of times in this industry with crime, especially because crime scene investigators respond after the fact. I can't do something to fix that situation. I can't help when somebody has been murdered, right? I can't undo that. But the
Yeah.
only thing that I can do is make sure that doesn't happen again. So that's the way I look at it. Like I have to absorb all of those, feelings of being in grief. I've spent over a dozen years in people's living rooms while they are standing next to their loved one who's passed away. Maybe it's suicide and reading suicide notes out loud. And that's somebody's brother or mother or son or daughter or sister or wife. And to be that empath and stand there, I know when I started, I was just like, okay, don't cry. Right. They're going to think you're insane. So don't cry, don't cry. But just be in that situation where you're standing in somebody's living room while they're experiencing the worst possible day of their life, their worst moments. I have to turn that into something positive or it will demolish me. So for me, I'm going to make sure that we focus on mental health, right? If it's a suicide, or we address PTSD or the things that nobody wants to talk about, or show emotion on my show, which was a choice that I made because people need to understand that we're humans with those feelings. If it's a homicide, what can I physically do as an investigator to make sure that people are held accountable, that this doesn't happen again? So I think, was it a career choice or was I just pushed to this so that I could make right between my empath side and my need for control over something?
Yeah. And like I think that's a really good approach because like we're so used to like from watching TV shows and stuff, we are so used to seeing maybe the hard-nosed detective that has the suspicious eye. So even like the family might be grieving there still has to be like for entertainment value. I'm just in this case, there has to be this kind of suspicious eye on the family because like a lot of times cases maybe are closer to home than we'd like to think. But so like I think when you come at it, like I think you have a brilliant line within in Crime Scene Confidential. I think it's in the trailer where you actually say, we can't bring them back, but we can bring them home. And I think that's leading with that like kind of more empathetic language. It's not like we're going to get them, we're going to get the bad guy, and we're going to bring them to justice. But no, it's actually going like from this. I think what you said, the worst day in someone's life, and instead of like just being like kind of this justice warrior, which we can be as well, but no, we're going to like bring this people like somewhat semblance of closure if they can ever get there, but some comfort. And I think that's a beautiful way, and I think that's why so many people connected with the show. It had that empathetic and emotional underpinning that we weren't used to seeing in the crime world. The crime world was about mystery, it was about spectacle, scandal, and these are really powerful things that we're drawn to. But we had this dirt or this absence of bringing the real humanity into it. And I suppose thinking on that track, like, do you remember, like, even when you were a child and stuff, like, was that empathy drive strong in you, or was it something that developed as you went on the trajectory into, into crime scene investigation, into forensics?
I feel like I have had that my entire life. When I was little, it would be animals, right? Your pets and things. And I remember being in Florida when it gets cold. We have a lot of lizards, and the lizards would freeze. And I asked my father to build a box with a little light bulb in it, and I would go around and collect all the frozen lizards and put them in a box so that they could warm up. And I mean, I was little, but already I don't think most people would probably look at that and they go, "Oh, that's a shame," or whatever. And I'm like, "No, I have to take them all." I would search around the yard and find them and put them in this box. So I think from the very beginning, my father loves to tell a story that we were traveling and we were going through Grand Central Station, big train station in New York, and my mother was taking me to the bathroom before we went on the train, and I don't even remember this, but there was a homeless man at the bottom of the steps, and I said something about him being dead, and my mom was like, "No, no, no, he's not dead. He's sleeping or whatever." He was dead, and we
Mm.
came back, and I told my dad. My dad went and got the police and was like, "Hey, we think this person has ceased to exist." And the police were like, "No, that's Fred. He just sleeps there." And they went and checked on him, and he was dead. So I had no issue with the death. It was just a very, kind of matter of fact, like, he's dead thing.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's kind of been ingrained in me forever.
Yeah, and so like there's that, because I can imagine if, like, for someone that cares so much like that, well, like when you put one of these bad people away, is there like a really deep sense of satisfaction? Like, because, and, not to go into the like serial killer arena, but like, a lot of them hurt animals, but even like the people that are hurting like humans, like, someone premeditates a murder. It's not just a crime of passion, or someone had that like evil, that nastiness, that darkness in them to really want to like vindictively hurt another human and or end their life. Like, so when you're able to like put your skills then to the test, you're able to put one of these people away. Like, what is there a sense of satisfaction, or is that like kind of curtained over by, there was still a life lost and there's still a kind of something doesn't sit right? Like, what's your emotional state then?
I wish I could say there was some sort of celebratory moment. I will also say that it's never one person's job, right? A crime scene investigator never solves the case. A detective never solves the case. That's one of my pet peeves is when I see people on talking about how they solved the case. Like, honey, there were 20 people behind that. There were, I could find the print, but it would take a latent print examiner to do a match. It would take a detective to track the person down. It's a group effort. So I would never then take full accountability for solving a case. I would be like, hell yeah, right? My print that was found identified a suspect or some DNA or whatever it was. So it would just be like maybe a quiet acknowledgement that okay, I'm doing the right thing. My instincts are on. Almost just a reminder that okay, I think everybody has imposter syndrome too, and there's that little bit of should I be doing this? Am I good enough? So it's like okay, yep, nod from the universe. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and then move on because there are so many other cases. People don't work one case at a time. Like it seems like on TV, you've got tons of cases that are open, and it's then just okay, now divert your attention to the next. And I would think from television that people think CSIs only work murders. But
Yeah.
we work bank robberies and burglaries and suicides and infant deaths and child abuse and all kinds of things that aren't necessarily covered with true crime. I guess nobody wants to watch, burglary the first 48 or whatever. It's not quite as
Yeah.
entertaining. So it gets a little bit of the work gets lost in that, in just thinking that we kind of solely do this one thing. There's a lot more that doesn't get shown.
Yeah, and I think that's the misconception, isn't it? I think I was telling you before when I outreached first, I had another CSI, Gabrielle Wimmer was her name. She'd come on the podcast and stuff like that, and she was saying like so much of it is literally just a burglary or a crime, like because murder is still rare. I know it's probably it appears more relevant in her psyche because it's more extreme. it still is like probably the rare enough. But like going into some of the cases, was there any case that like really shocked you? Like, is there any case that stays with you uh, that is just like it touched something inside you?
You know, I don't know that there's a singular case, right? There are cases that have gotten more media coverage, so they stick with me in the fact of I can't escape them because they're, rehashed on the news media all the time. But also, I'm getting old enough now that the cases I work, the newer, younger generation doesn't know about. So there's a little bit of that. Certainly living in Orlando, the Pulse nightclub shooting, which at the time was the largest mass shooting in US history. It's sad for me to have to say at the time, but there were 49 people that were killed.
Oh my God.
And that was my hometown. That was, that's my heart. So I didn't work the scene as a crime scene investigator. I was actually on an emergency response team for the state of Florida. And we dealt with identifying human remains, basically getting people identified so that their family members, in an incident like that where there were so many people, it was a nightclub. So people would drop wallets or IDs or purses, and we would have people that we didn't necessarily know who they were, and family members that are reporting so and so hasn't come home, or are they inside? And so there's a lot of chaos with an incident like that. And I was stationed at the morgue, the medical examiner's office, and assisting with the autopsies on the 49 victims. So that one obviously is going to live in my heart just because of the enormity.
Yeah.
Every year there's an anniversary, and I always, kind of take a minute to think about that. And I think every investigator has a similar story for whatever reason that something really sticks with them. And it's not always murder. I worked a child abuse case with this little boy, and as child abuses are often reported by teachers at school, then they can call the investigators in to gather photographs and interview the child with the parents not finding out. And I went to interview this little boy, and he didn't speak any English, or very little. He was at like a preschool, basically.
Yeah.
And the social worker lifted up the back of his shirt, and he had scars. I mean, this boy was not even 4, maybe, and he had scars. And so that tells me the life that he has already lived, his 4 years on this planet, the pain that he has endured at the hands of people that are supposed to love and nurture and care for him. And they were looped scars, so it looked to me like they had been using a cord or a cable that was looped to beat him. And I tried to develop a rapport with him. I had to photograph the injuries, and so I had little stickers. We have scales so that when we put them on the injury and we take a photograph, we know how big the injury is. And so I let him play with some. I let him put them on my hand, and then I would put him on him, and then I would take the photos and kind of develop this rapport. Right before I went to leave and walk out the door, he ran to me and wrapped his arms around my leg and hugged me. And I cried the entire way back to the sheriff's office, because while my job there was to document these injuries, and then it's somebody else's job to research, visit the home, hold the parents accountable, I don't know what happens to that little boy.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
It's so hard. And again, like what's so tragic there is like even the way he ran, hugged your leg and stuff like that, probably hasn't had much affection,
That's
experienced much affection in all his life.
But he
Uh,
still has it in his heart, right?
he
Even though he's
has.
endured all of this and has scars to what he's gone through, he's still capable of loving somebody enough that he could come and hug a perfect stranger, because maybe I had showed him an iota of attention or kindness that he maybe hadn't seen. And so, yeah, that one was hard. But
Yeah, definitely.
there's little things like that that happen every day for years, which is why I, I don't know if it was a conscious decision. Maybe it was, because I think when you go on television, um, when I'm not an actress, so when you go on television and I'm not playing a part, I'm just being Alina. It's scary to put yourself out there in any way, shape, or form, because you know what happens if you go on social media, if you go on whatever. Everybody's always got a comment, right? They're gonna love you or they're gonna hate you. But then to kind of open up with the most raw emotions that you're feeling in the time, it makes you extra vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so I had to decide, do I just open up, be vulnerable, be that person, tear up when I tear up, not try to hide those things? or just kind of choke it back and be that traditional character you mentioned, right? The hard detective type. And I thought it was really important for not only the world, but for CSIs to feel represented, to feel like, yes, we have to go through these things. And we're often forgotten. People focus on first responding officers and things like that, but CSIs often aren't necessarily considered when it comes to that trauma. So I thought it was important for the CSIs to say, this is what we do, these are the things we go through. And for the world to see people, we're humans with human emotions, and this is hard. And also, somebody gives a damn. Because I think right now, especially, it's very easy to feel like nobody cares about what anybody's going through. And if you turn on TV and you feel like, wow, it's not just a number, it's not just another case, that somebody actually cared about that person's life, it was worth it to me to be vulnerable for those outcomes.
100%. And like, I think it's because we're already dealing with something that's like horrific. It's a tragedy. Like, you're not being called to a scene because, someone celebrated a really good birthday, or, there was, it's not good.
For good reason. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I think the humanizing it, like, I see this so much with, like, you see this with corporations, you see everything, like, a lot of big brands that, like, just, it's so corporate. But like when they actually lead with, like, having some sort of human response or some sort of human communications, like, you know, I work in B2B sales as well, ad sales. And I just see like so much of the business to business content is just so dehumanized. It's about product. Doesn't connect. But I think there's something so connecting about like having a human report approach. I think that's what probably really gelled Crime Scene Confidential. That you warp up here, 100%. Look, there's idiots online that are just going to like try and tear into something, and there's idiots online as well that they will see someone that's like more empathetic, or they'll see someone like that, and they'll just go in for the sake of it. Like, they're obviously bending more towards the darkness than the light, but they get like some sort of kick out of it. And again, maybe it's, you know, maybe they're like that little guy that just had a terrible upbringing, and that like they were churned out of the system, they didn't get anything, and life has hardened them to where they're maybe how they deal with being all that hurt is by hurting someone else, and that's a sad thing.
Hurt people. And generally, the way that I dealt with, online feedback or negativity or whatever is, especially if it's something I can change, then you have to think about that, right? Should I be more this way, that? But if it's an attack on physical appearance or something that's it just is what it is, um, I would say to them, I'm sorry that whatever you've gone through has led you to this point. I would try to even approach criticism as from an empathy perspective, because I'm so thankful that I haven't been hurt in a way that causes me to leak out that hurt onto somebody else. And that's really all that it is uh it's telling me your issues through the way that you critique. So
Yeah.
when you attack physical appearance, you have probably felt one of a few things. Your physical appearance has been attacked, or you feel like you're not free to be yourself, and so you're angry at people that are. So
Yeah.
I mean, I always go back to why people do what they do. Why does this behavior exist? So, and I cannot turn that aspect of my brain off. So even in getting feedback like that, my first thought is, what has this person been through? Because it would indicate these things. So I had posted a meme on my Instagram page a couple days ago that said, keep talking, I'm not done diagnosing you.
I love that. That is
It's
brilliant. Actually, that brings me on to a question. Like, if you were like, I'm not sure if you like, do you know the ocean model of personality? Like, so openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, neurotic, and there's one more I'm missing. But like, I think like that trait, openness, is, I think like empaths tend to have that like fairly, they're fairly high on trait openness. But do you think that like would almost be an accelerator then for like crime scene investigation? Like, if you're open to these possibilities, you're open to these outcomes. Like, do you think that's a like almost? Do you think there's a fatalistic way that like having this kind of high empathy drives kind of dovetailed really nicely to be competent in a role that where you need to be able to be open to a lot of possibilities and discern a lot of detail.
100%. I feel like that is one of the things that made me good at my job. Is, there's levels, right? There's levels of specificity. When I used to teach, when we're talking about investigation, I could ask you, Gary, tell me in 10 steps what you did this morning, right? And you would say, I got up and I brushed my teeth and I had a tea and a biscuit and whatever. Okay, well, that's one way. I could break that down into 300 steps, because first you had the thought of something that awakened you, your alarm, a bird, a dog barking, and then you opened your eyes. Then you had a thought to move your limbs, to stand up. And right, so there's levels of specificity. Is it I got up and I had a tea? I put the tea bag in the cup. I boiled water. I poured the water into the cup. I got a spoon from the drawer. I grabbed sugar and milk. And right, there's all these things. And I think it has helped me in that aspect. I don't see things from a canoeing standpoint. I see them from a scuba diving standpoint. It's a different depth, I think, when you
Yeah.
get to a scene and you can see the things that are laid out. You can see the physical things. I can see the cartridge casings, or I can see the weapon, or I can go down deeper to understand a little bit about why they're here and not here. Where did somebody have to go? Where did that knife come from? Did they bring it with them? Did it come from the kitchen? Right. So it's all about how you think and those different levels. And I think empathy has allowed me to go to a level that maybe not everybody is capable of.
I think definitely on that. All I'm thinking there as well is that like that almost sounds so exhausting. What are you doing to like how like what's your escapism? Like or sorry, what was your escapism after this? Because like I know if I have a long day of writing where I'm going into a lot of detail, because like a writer will like you could have 10,000 decisions to make, write in 5 6 hours because am I going to use this word or that? It's exhausting. You're absolute wrecked. I might as well have did a 10 20K run. So I can imagine for you it's way because the stakes are so much higher. I'm a word on a page can be changed, but like missing a shell case and missing this, missing that, it's vital. So how are you unwinding? How are you de-stressing? What's the escape after work? Or is there?
So, they define extroverts and introverts by it doesn't mean that I can't have extroverted characteristics, that I can't turn it on when I need to,
Yeah,
but it is whether or not social engagement drives you and almost charges your battery, or does it drain your battery? And for me as an introvert and as an empath, my battery gets drained very quickly. And I require a lot of, I think, alone time, just time to be with my thoughts, to process through things, to not have to be anything to anyone, right? To not
yeah,
have to be on. And I think after cases, over the years, I've looked at some cold cases or serial killer cases or whatnot, and to delve into those cases and put yourself in that mindset of the bad person. Why do I do this? What motivates me? Where would I put the body? Why would I choose that victim? All of those things. It's gross. I really don't know another word to describe it, right? It's icky,
yeah.
and it's exhausting. And afterwards, I just feel like I want to put pajamas on and watch cartoons and like have pancakes. So like just like comforting types of things. And that's what I do. I like to work out. I have pets. They're all things that we do, coping mechanisms.
For medicine, I think is the thing what to say with pets. We have a cat, and it does feel. I think it's the oxytocin. I think there's actually a scientific basis to like a for medicine, which sounds weird for people that don't maybe have cats. They think, well, I'm a cook. I take it. But do you know what I'm thinking there as well? So, like, I remember back in, I think it was like 2008, I was like, I think it was like the recession had hit. I was like out of work, all that, things were shit. I had a lot of time on my hands and I used to play Call of Duty, which is the video game, for like maybe 8 or 9 hours, like a long time. I remember I'd be going to sleep at night. Honestly, I'd close my eyes and I'd see myself like aiming aiming up, shooting people and all that. Like when you're processing them scenes and you're in the zone and you're in the zone for 8, 9 hours. Like when you're closing your eyes at night, are you back there? Like do you have them flashbacks or anything, or is it no? Is it have you? Is your brain able to kind of decompartmentalize? I think between work and no, this is personal time.
Yes and no. So if I were on a scene where I was lifting a lot of fingerprints, I would like fall asleep and close my eyes and I would see ridge detail, like when I would close my eyes
Oh,
because I've been looking at them all day long or lifting them all day long or processing. So there was a little bit of that. I don't think I have the typical dreams that people would anticipate. They would think, oh,
mm,
you have so much trauma. My Rolodex of images uh, is vast, right? So when people say things, I have the pictures that go along with it, right? I don't need to imagine. I've been through that, right? So I don't have nightmares of things like that. Like I don't
yeah.
see the pictures or hear crying or whatnot. My dreams are typically either right, you have to testify in court and you're on the stand and you don't know what case it is and you don't have your report, like the typical stress dreams. I have worked crime scenes in my sleep. I
Okay.
have I don't like holding a crime scene. So, holding a crime scene being like, you work it all day, you put a deputy on it overnight, go home and go to sleep, you come back and you start working it again the next day, right? So, an extensive thing. Um, Pretty much every time I've held a crime scene overnight, I have worked it in my sleep. And I have awakened the next morning going, I need to swab the sink drain. I need to, like, I've had a to do list. Um, and honestly, I think it's good because when you're in it, there's so much stress and you almost need to get away from it a little bit and decompress. And then you're open to more, okay, what else should I be doing that I haven't done already? Or let me think outside the box. Where could I, go next or whatever? So yeah, I usually work crime scenes in my sleep or just have stress related dreams about, being late and unprepared like everybody else.
Yeah. What's interesting there, like with court then, like, because I think that's the part sometimes you miss out on. Or like, I think like any fan, like crime CSI or anything like that, you just see them solve the case and it's done. And then the next episode's on to the next case. But obviously, court happens, and like I know with the, what was it, the Kaylee Anthony case, um, you know, court cases fall apart. Like, but how stressful then is it getting up? Have we everything? Have we enough evidence? Have we the ducks in a row? Like, how do you even determine that we have enough? Like, is there a universal kind of metric or rubrics that you're like, okay, we can go to trial with that? Or maybe I know maybe that doesn't fall on the forensic team. Maybe it's coming more from the DA. But how does that whole process of like, okay, we're ready for court come about?
So obviously, to go to court, you would have to have somebody that was arrested and charged with a particular crime. So my role in that is gathering the evidence that can either identify a suspect or link the suspect to the crime scene and the victim. So that's the crime scene triangle. We've got suspect, victim, crime scene. My job is to make connections between those three things. I got to put the victim at the crime scene, the suspect at the crime scene, the suspect with the victim, right? Everything I do revolves around that little triangle. So my job is to document, right? Photograph the crime scene. My job is to identify items of evidence that have evidential value because not everything has value. And it's the art and the science of crime scene investigation is not going into a place and just collecting everything, right? I can't just sweep the whole place into a bag and call it a day. So the art and the science is identifying what has value, what is there that should not be there, what is missing that should be here, and then writing a report, photographing injuries, going to the if we have a deceased individual, I would also go to the medical examiner's office and take fingerprints from the deceased before they're buried or have whatever end of life procedure they prefer. And so I would do all of that and then pass that information along to a detective. The detective is simultaneously looking at surveillance video, interviewing people that were maybe on or near the scene or family members. Information comes about at different points in time, right? So I maybe could have a fingerprint and have somebody ID'd super fast, or it takes years of time for people to come forward and say, because maybe they're no longer afraid to say, I saw this, I know this. And so there really isn't a magic button. There's no McDonald's menu where you pick a
Yeah.
number six, right? It's every scene has to be worked differently. It's all dependent upon what I find, what detectives find, what we kind of mesh together. But then assuming that all of that blends, we have a suspect. They would go to the judge basically and say, this is, why we think this person. Do we have enough to put these charges on this person? And then it goes to trial. So it's a long, lengthy process. And then as a CSI, I might not even know they've made an arrest in a case. I might get a subpoena to go to court and go, oh, I guess they made an arrest in that case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what's the uncertainty like that? Like, 'cause every day you would have been waking up, like, you don't know where you're going to be. Like, there's no, like, you just go into the office. It's like you're waiting for, like, are you on call? Is that the correct terminology, maybe, that you're on call?
So it depends on every crime lab. They're all different. But the way that it would work for us is we worked 4 10-hour shifts. And so I would either work 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. or I would work 2 p.m. to midnight. Those were our 2 shifts. We did not have 24-hour coverage. So that leaves a gap from midnight until 7 a.m. where nobody's working. That's when you are on call. So we
Ah,
would have a primary CSI that was on call and a secondary CSI. So the primary, something happens, they ask for forensics. Dispatch would call you in the middle of the night. Your phone rings at 2 a.m. Hey, we got this burglary, robbery, whatever it is. And you would go in and handle it. If you got another call, you would finish your call that you were on, go to the next call. If it was just something that 2 calls came in at once, you would have to call out the secondary CSI as well. So it was 4 10-hour shifts plus being on call from midnight until 7 a.m.
yeah. And like when you're going to the scene, like, 'cause I think the thing that always struck me as so wild was, because I used to love CSI. Like, it was literally one of my favorite shows. Like, when it came out, it was just so good. It was like they were rocking up to the crime scenes, like, kind of really dressed up nicely and stuff like that. In Ireland, they're in these like white overalls, plastic, kind of like that. All you can see is that. Like, what way do you, like, because I've seen clips of you even on the trailer, Crime Scene Confidential, where you're kind of more in like a short slacks and stuff like that. But when you're going to process the scene, are you geared up into like into like plastic overalls and stuff?
It depends on the scene.
Oh wow,
It
okay.
depends on the scenes. And mind you, I think it was probably a career high that I was able to chat with Anthony Zeiker, the creator of CSI, the TV show. And I gave him so much shit. I was like, man, you made my life, you made my life miserable because for a 10-year period of time, every time I, pull up to Chipotle to eat lunch, people would be like, I didn't do it. Or, or they'd be like, you got 58 minutes to find out who did it.
Yeah, 58 minutes.
I literally did have the chance to tell Zeiker that he made my life hell. But it's different, right? So if it's a completely unknown, like a body that's found in a field, right? Something
Yeah.
where we would call that a body dump, then I would take a greater level of precaution in terms of not leaving fingerprints, DNA, shoe tracks, whatever. Obviously, we do that for all scenes. But if it were a domestic, where we know both parties were living under the same roof, and there's not like a third party, an unknown third party type of thing, then it wouldn't require putting on full. We call it Tyvek, right? It's that plasticized paper type of suit.
Yeah.
So, we would know when the time was to put that on. We would always cover your feet, right? Because we don't want to leave our own shoe tracks. We need to differentiate between ours and potentially a suspect's. So we had shoe covers that we would put on our feet, obviously gloves. So the level of PPE, it's called personal protective equipment, that you would wear would depend on the needs of that individual scene.
Yeah. I suppose that kind of makes sense as well, but I think it probably wouldn't have been as good for the show if they weren't rocking up and
Yeah,
the outfits.
that's one of the things is, people would always like, oh, why aren't you wearing high heels? And where's your Hummer? And this and that. So like
Yeah.
crime scene
The
investigator,
glasses.
my sunglasses, I had to take them off every time I worked a scene.
Yeah.
I drove a Dodge Grand Caravan, right? I looked like I was taking the kids to soccer practice. It wasn't a Hummer, right? We wouldn't wear high heels or anything like that. I'm working a 10-hour shift. I don't want to wear high heels for 2 hours, much less 10.
Yeah.
So that's not happening. Nothing is low cut, right? I don't want hot casings falling down my shirt.
Yeah,
we
that's
do test
wild.
fire weapons and things like that, right? So no, I'm in the state of Florida. I can say that our uniform was a short sleeve polo shirt and
Yeah,
black BDU pants, so battle dress uniform, same thing the military wears with the pockets, so that you
yeah,
can put your notepad and your camera and your compass and all the stuff you got to carry in your pockets. Yeah.
yeah. So, Alina, maybe even projecting out then onto like kind of going into the teaching career, like how, from the time you got into forensics, like has there been wild leaps in the technology and science? Because I know DNA was obviously so big, but that was back in what, 80s? I don't know, probably around then. But like that was a huge breakthrough. But like, has there been any like major jumps like since in terms of how forensics is processed or the technology?
I think so because forensic science is the most rapidly evolving field outside of medicine. Um, I will say the process remains the same, right? We're going to document, but when I started, we used film, and I would stuff my pockets with rolls of film, and then we moved to digital, right? Everybody was very scared about having crime scene images on an SD card and what was going to happen to that, and the process for uploading and everything. So we still document, but it's shifted from film to digital photography. We're still going to maybe do a diagram, but it's shifted to laser technology. Laser scanning technology is basically the bar has been set. So we have 360-degree scans that are taken. It's a little device that sends lasers out. It strikes every object, returns that back to the scanner, and because we know the speed of light, we can calculate that as a distance. So it makes a completely virtual 3D environment of your crime scene, which gives jurors or anybody that's trying to understand the case, it could be your chain of command, it could be a judge, the idea of spatial relationships. So we've seen photographs, right? Photographs have always been the way crime scenes are documented, but those are 2D. I can't rotate it. I can't turn the photo around and see what's behind it. Nor when I look at two photos, do I know how far apart those things were. Crime scene investigators are taught you take overall mid-range close-up photos so that we get that relationship. We understand in the big picture now I can see it's why we use evidence markers. So that it draws your attention, something is there. So in the overall photo, I see evidence marker 1, 2, 3, and then I just see evidence marker 2 and where it is in the room, and now I see the casing that evidence marker 2 is marking. That's how we establish those spatial relationships. Now it's laser scanners because I don't have to, I can turn it around. I don't have to show these three photos and say, well, that was here in this photo. It's a complete virtual copy. And you can put on VR goggles if you want and go into that, and you can turn
Walk into the scene.
inside your crime scene. So yeah, we've seen that shift certainly with DNA, right? DNA started with just ABO typing. You could only tell if it was A or B or A, B or O. That was it. That was all you got. And
What
if
was
your
that?
victim and your
Really?
suspect were both type O, sorry for you. We
Oh, when
can't do it.
DNA came out first, like it wasn't like because
That,
I just thought like, oh, DNA that's been there years. No, it's advanced even since then. Like,
that's advanced even since then. So
whoa.
we went from we can get DNA profiles to, if we have mixed profiles, they can separate them. They can do things to clean and separate that DNA. Then, we looked at mitochondrial DNA. You inherit mitochondrial DNA from your mother. It is only matrilineally inherited. And so we can look at mitochondrial DNA to make identifications. If we're, say, on a hair, your hair has mitochondrial DNA through the entire length. It only has nuclear DNA if there is a root present. So if we had a head hair, if it lacked a root, for a long time, there wasn't anything that you could do with that, except say it's brown, it's dyed or not dyed, and it's this length or, kind of what we call class characteristics. You couldn't individualize that to somebody. Now, I think the latest and the direction that crime scene investigation is truly going is forensic genetic genealogy or forensic investigative genetic genealogy. It was used in the Koberger case, right? To say we've got DNA and now we're going to look at that family tree and see who this could belong to. That was one of the things that really kind of cinched him as the suspect in that case. And that is how we are now going to be solving cases.
Yeah. And was that the same with the Golden State Killer? Was he the same where they kind of caught him on like a genealogy tree? Was it? Or was it a
Yes.
cousin or something? Wow. And that Colbert, I wasn't like I know his case. He's the Idaho murderer guy, is he? Yeah. So that's how they were able to catch him.
It was it was a plethora of things, right? So they had that video surveillance footage. They saw that it was a white Hyundai Elantra. They were starting to look for a Hyundai Elantra, and then as the investigation goes on, and they think that it could potentially be this particular person, they did DNA on the knife sheath, right? The knife sheath was left behind on the crime scene. And as most knife sheaths have a snap or something that you're going to have to physically touch to open, that's the best possible place for DNA because you are forcibly scraping off those skin cells onto the surface of that snap. Well, pretty much investigators can swab that snap and then they can enter it into CODIS. It's the Combined Offender DNA Indexing System. And that is a database of any known felons. So if you, in the United States, if you're a felon, your DNA gets entered into CODIS as part of after you are found guilty. They swab you in the courtroom, you go into CODIS. So it's built this database. Now, if the person has never committed a felony, hasn't had their DNA put into CODIS, then you just now have a big question mark. You have unknown DNA and you might be able to tell like, it's a male, but you don't know whose it is. So in this case, the Hyundai Elantra information built with other things that the detectives were doing brought them to, could it be Koberger? So they did a trash pull. Your trash when you leave it out at the street is abandoned property, so you don't need a
Yeah.
warrant for that. So they went and pulled trash and they did DNA examinations on things like a discarded soda can or a cigarette butt or a toothbrush or anything that has DNA. And they found that the DNA they found from the trash can was related to the DNA they found on the knife snap. So now they know. Now, it hasn't yet said who this individual is, but it has said that we're in the right direction, right? Every piece of evidence is not like a case doesn't get solved on one. So you start in a big funnel, right, of
Yeah.
Hyundai Elantras, right? And then you go down to the DNA and the knife snap and comparing it. And then that would lead to, now we're going to get a swab from Koberger. Now we're going to compare that to the knife snap. And then when those results come back, right? So that's kind of how it all works.
And that's textbook forensic. It's just like the way the case builds bit by bit, bit by bit.
It's observations. It's not just, hardcore science, right? We have fingerprints and DNA and things like that, but it's also injuries that are on his hands. It's being seen with gloves on. It's, putting your trash in plastic bags. It's every decision that you make, right? The turning the cell phone off so that it doesn't ping.
Yeah.
That's evidence in and of itself, right? So
Yeah.
either your cell phone is on and it's pinging close to where the victims are murdered, or it's just off during the period where the victims are murdered. No matter what you do, if it's a conscious decision to evade identification, you're just leaving more evidence. It's just in a different way. So every decision that's made or not made is a clue.
Yeah, and like just when you bring up cell phone, like that has to be one of the biggest game changers, is it? Like, because I put up on the Dark Finds Instagram page, I put up it was a video, it was probably a few weeks ago, where it was like they were reading out this guy's search history in court. Like he'd allegedly murdered his wife. I think he was convicted, but like if you just seen his search history through like between 3 in the morning till 7 in the morning, it's like how to dispose of a body. What? Oh my God! Like, but there's this treasure trove of evidence. Like, but how substantiating then in court is that? Like, when it gets to court, like, so say that search history, like, that is evidence, or like, is it proxy evidence? Or yeah, it is evidence.
Circumstantial evidence, right?
Oh,
That's what we call
circumstantial. Okay.
circumstantial evidence. So is a jury going to convict because of your browser history? No, not likely. You look at my browser history. Good Lord, when I've done certain investigations, I would
That's
look
what
up
I'd say.
things, and it doesn't mean I've killed somebody, but I'm looking up, different styles of knives because I need
Yeah.
to try to match it back to a wound that I've seen, and or whatever.
Oh God, you're on a watch list.
Yeah, I'm definitely on a watch list. I get pulled for TSA security every time I travel, so I am on a list for sure. But yeah, it's a piece of circumstantial evidence. So when we look at the jury's job is to look at the totality of the evidence, right?
Mm.
So not, yeah, your search is that looks pretty sus, right? All these things that you Googled, maybe they searched their victim's name, something that makes it just even a little bit more connected, or but it could also be their purchase history. All right. We saw that with Koberger as well. Amazon, thinking that purchasing with a gift card was somehow going to be not traceable, or um,
Yeah.
yeah, it could be the video camera footage from the store where you bought a roll of duct tape and some black garbage bags and bleach and whatever, right? Could be that as well. So it's really up to how much circumstantial evidence, how much physical evidence do we have, and how much is circumstantial. And that's really one of the things we looked at on Crime Scene Confidential, with a lot of the evidence was circumstantial. And then we had some physical evidence, but it was interesting to see how both sides can spin circumstantial evidence for
Yeah.
their own purpose or their own outcome.
Yeah, like the Todd Sturmer case
Yeah.
on, oh my, like that one just blew my mind. I wasn't aware of that case until I'd seen it on the show, like, and it's just, yeah, and then it's like, I think she got convicted this year, was it?
Yeah. Yeah. The trial was
A
this.
retrial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Retrial, and she was convicted.
Like, what do you think on that? Like, I don't know if you can kind of talk, because I know I had that Dr. Catherine Ramsdale on, like, she taught that Kohlberger criminology, but she wasn't allowed to talk about it. So I don't know if you're allowed to talk about these things, so just say no if not. But yeah, like, what was your take on that?
It's hard, and I think everybody wants me to have an opinion,
Yeah, I know.
like a yes or a no, and it's nothing is ever black and white in my
Yeah.
world. Things are always very much shades of gray. I think we have to. I tried to pose questions to the audience because I
Mm.
don't want to tell you how to think. That's
Yeah.
not critical thinking, right? I don't want to tell you, this or that. I want to tell you certain pieces of factual information and have you draw your own conclusion, right? So I would present in a way where it was like, okay, most fires in which people are killed happen in the middle of the night because the fire has a chance to get really fully going before people are awake and understanding and they can't escape or something. So what is odd, and usually the victims are people that have mobility issues, right? Elderly or children or handicapped, right? They can't get up and get out quickly. So when we look at that particular case, we have two, I think as I phrase it in the show, able-bodied adults and a fire that happens in the middle of the day. So
Mm.
why do two able-bodied adults not make it out?
Yeah.
Right? That's the question. So I wish that I could have done other things in terms of I would have loved to have seen his blood work, right? Because it's what you can do blood work, and blood work will come back and it will tell you something like, they have illegal drugs or prescription drugs in their system. But if you have something specific you're looking for, you would have to do a test for that. So if you don't, there's no chance of going back unless you still have a well kept vial of somebody's blood. So, for instance, being that there were so many horses on the property, and that horse tranquilizers or horse medications were kept in their own refrigerator, I would have loved to have seen his blood checked for those things, right? So, was there a reason that an able-bodied man did not make it out of a fire that occurred during the day? Well, a lot of the reasons are maybe he wasn't conscious.
Yeah.
And if he's not conscious, why? Are we looking at blunt force trauma, or are we looking at, a medication that was administered?
Yeah, it is giving me Dexter vibes with that's what he used, wasn't it? It was the equine tranquilizer to subdue victims. But yeah, again, yeah, but like again, there's so much hypotheticals in cases. Like I think I don't know how you choose the cases for. Actually, let me ask, how do you choose the cases for the show?
Yeah. Well, we had a list of about 15 criteria.
Oh
So
wow. Yeah.
I won't bore you with all of them, but one was that it was already adjudicated, had gone to trial, because you can't get access to ongoing cases, right? Nobody is going to talk to you. So if I want to be able to talk to people, it has to have already kind of come to some conclusion.
Yeah.
We want to have controversy, right? Was there someone that got found guilty that should have been innocent, or somebody innocent that should have been found guilty?
Yeah.
Like, how, there's some kind of controversy there. We have to have forensic evidence. So we have to have some type of forensic evidence at the core that I can speak to and explain. We wanted access to the crime scene for me to be able to go back and look at, in these, I was in the same exact house where somebody was murdered. And I walked in, it was a case from season 1. And I walked in and I thought, okay, he was there and children were sleeping, and I could literally touch the wall where so I didn't have a good idea again of those spatial relationships. So when I read the reports, I think, well, why didn't the children wake up? Well, maybe they were in a far bedroom. When I
Mm.
get to the house and I'm standing in the hallway going, he was here and the kids were right here. And this was a 45 caliber. Like, why didn't the kids wake up? Which gives me more idea of maybe the children kind of similarly, were they medicated in some way to help them sleep? Was this premeditated? Um, so yeah, those are the main kind of core things that we wanted to show, yeah, in the show, and that we wanted to talk to the original people, right? I want to talk to the investigators that did the case, or the CSIs, or the first responding officers, or family members, because to me, true crime can feel a little, I don't know, like we're
Silly.
taking advantage, right?
Yeah.
Salacious, just a little like carnivorous almost, like
Yeah, yeah, it is.
taking advantage of somebody's pain and horrible moments for the good of television. So I an outcome that I wasn't expecting was that a lot of times people know of these cases because, right, somebody has died and they've released the details of the death through the news. So we know, right, how they were killed and it was horrible and terrible, but we know nothing about that person and who they were in their life. We don't
Yeah,
know if they were a dad or a mom, or that they, played softball and whatnot. So for me to give equal time to their life was important, and to not have the world know who they were only through the details of their death.
yeah. I think that's a really good way to put it, because so often, and I think it makes sense, but it still doesn't make it right, that like we're naturally gravitated towards the extremity, which is normally the killer, and not the victim, which is sometimes a product of circumstance, and it's deeply sad. But whatever, we're wired up to look for. We always want to see the best team play, the fastest runner, or the most evil person. It's just the way we kind of go. But I think so often you're right. We sidestep. Well, actually, sorry. I think true crime we are going through, I think, this change where you see a lot of the documentaries now, where 15 years ago it would have been Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, and it would have been all about him. Where now you're seeing a lot of these shows. I just seen one in the UK. It was about the Yorkshire Ripper, and it went through all his victims more so than him. And I think that's probably because not, I don't want to say glorified, but we've sensationalized the the villains, and not any of the devastation they've left.
We have. And that's why when I talk about cases, I refer to them by the victim's name and not the suspect, because the suspect doesn't need any more airtime. So,
Mm,
typically I get asked a lot about the Kaylee Anthony case. So, and
yeah,
they'll say, tell me about the Casey Anthony case. And I'll say the Kaylee Anthony case, right? We need to talk about the victims and not the suspects quite as much. It's my pet peeve, I think, too. I have a lot of them, but they always cast attractive people in the roles of murderers. So it's like, okay, like let's look at Channing Tatum playing this thing, like, and it even does more to sensationalize the role of the suspect or the offender than it does the victim, right? I don't.
yeah. What's sort of like it was what? What's that? Zac Efron playing Ted Bundy. It was like
That's
he's like the hottest guy on the planet, and he's like this, like I think level 10, like tier 10 psychopath, like just like, and probably the most chilling. I think he's more chilling than Ed Gein, or Albert Fish, or some of these more depraved kind of characters, because there is nothing more unarresting than his charm. Like, he literally, your defenses are down. Like, if I seen Ed Gein, or if I seen one of these kind of that Canadian butcher that was like putting people into sausages and stuff like that. Like, he was so gross. I would instantly know to my whatever, that limbic system in my brain would snap and say, "Hey, keep away from that person." But Ted Bundy was like this almost parasite that was able to slip under the defenses, and I think that is the terror. That's the real scary person. And then to go cast Zac Efron,
right.
which is
Yeah.
crazy,
Well,
absolutely
that
crazy.
hits on a different thing that people do that we don't talk about or we don't realize we're doing, and that is that we all have a mindset of what a bad guy looks like,
Mm,
right? We all have an idea. So it's right, like you said, it's probably somebody that's not attractive, not well kept, We have our mindset of what that looks like. And
Yeah.
so a lot of the times, the cases that make the news media are because it's an affront to that. It's something that challenges us, right? When we see good looking people committing crime, we go, oh, like people ask me a lot, why did that case make the news and this case didn't? Well, there are certain things we want to feel. And as humans, we categorize and say, crime is something that happens over there. It doesn't
Mhm.
happen where I live, right? Or
Yeah.
crime is something that happens to them, not us, right? You look at, it's men, it's brown and black people, it's whatever you have decided that crime is in your mind. And so when we see on the news cases that are in wealthy neighborhoods, we go, oh, that's not what crime looks like. We don't realize we're doing it, but that's why we're interested, is because it challenges the concept of what crime is, where crime happens, who commits crime in our minds. And it's very similar with that. Like, Zac Efron isn't, typically who I would picture being leading a life of crime.
Definitely, but like it snaps the heuristic. That's the thing. The heuristic is degraded, and it's like you're kind of like. I think it's more memorable then. Like a perfect actually example. I just thought of it here now as you were saying that Luigi Maggioni, really good looking guy, valedictorian, seeming like from all outward appearances, you would think this guy had everything. Wealthy family, good family by all accounts. Uh, and then to do something so like, kind of insane, like to go shoot like a CEO. And I think, look, I don't know, like, because some people are like, whatever way you fall on that, like, I think murder is wrong. I know some people are like celebrating it. I think that's a gross. I don't think I could ever celebrate that really. That's just, yeah. But whatever reason, he's become like this almost icon among these people. And I get, look, but the thing is, you understand this as well. People feel so disenfranchised,
So,
so let down. They feel hopeless, and again, it's almost this kind of this kind of someone goes does something like that. It feels like, oh, they're on our side, but he's a perfect case of why. Like, I think it was a strange. It's not normal a CEO gets shot in New York at 6 a.m., but it's a perfect thing. Like that's still in the media. It's still legs.
yeah, and I think that, like, there are a couple reasons, like you said. I think the kind of adoption of him as a cult hero icon, or a Robin Hood or whatever, is largely based on how people feel about how they've been treated, their health has been treated, their health care has been treated. It would be very interesting to see if that case would have happened with somebody not attractive. What would have happened? I would love to see that,
Do you know what that?
because would people be quite as willing to, to adopt that love for him, or whatever it is, the heroism they've attached to him? I think, in America, we do not have a universal healthcare system. So when you're unemployed, you have no healthcare. It's very expensive. It can be $600-700 or more a month just to have healthcare. And I actually shared a story on my social media that somewhere around the year 2000, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. I had done an MRI. I get really bad migraines, and I'd gone to the doctor and said, I, see all this medicine on TV. Give me one of those, right? I need something to help with the migraines. They said, well, we need to do an MRI first. So they did an MRI, and they found a 3 millimeter tumor on the pons area of my brainstem. And okay, so they come in, the doctor calls me and says, you need to see a neurologist or neurosurgeon. This is in an inoperable area of your brain. It's likely benign, but it can't be removed. So go see the surgeon. So make my appointment, go see the surgeon. The surgeon says, well, what we really need to do is another MRI that has contrast. The first one was just an MRI. We need an MRI with contrast. And that was declined by my health insurance. And it goes through a process of review. And they thought, well, you've already had one MRI, so you don't get another. And it didn't matter that I had been diagnosed with a brain tumor. It mattered that I'd already had an MRI, and that was good enough in their minds. And to kind of put insults on injury at that point, is it goes to a medical doctor to review the necessary nature of this, right? Is this frivolous? Which, I don't know about you, but I don't get MRIs for shits and giggles. But a doctor reviews the case file and declined it. And that doctor was an OBGYN. A gynecologist declined my need for a MRI of my brain.
What, like, yeah. See,
So
none of
people
that
are,
shenanigans exists in Ireland. Like, and we don't
yeah,
have a we're not like the UK where they have the NHS or that. But like, you normally, like, if something's on your policy, it's covered. But like, what is that kind of
yeah.
cowboy kind of
And
policy
when
making?
when I shared that, everybody came on with their. My husband was diagnosed with cancer. They declined everything until he just died because they just wanted to not pay, and they waited until he died. And all the people that shared their stories of the similar experiences tells me exactly why people have identified Luigi as a hero, because everybody has some story of struggle of just trying to live and having the, it's a, we like to do these dichotomies, right? We like an us versus them. And
Mm,
it really became us, the people that are just trying to live,
yeah,
against the CEOs and the companies that are making decisions to prevent that.
yeah. And like when you like, if I took the Hare's, PCLR, like the psychopathy checklist, and put like pretty much did a pretty much filled out the questionnaire to the criterion of which maybe some of these companies operate. I can imagine like they're, because it's predatory practice, it'd be very high on that psychopathy scale, which is sad. Like I think, I mean, you can still make money and not have to do bad. Like that's the wild thing. Like, but yeah, I think maybe sometimes greed is yeah, yeah, overpowers maybe this kind of rational or this actually, someone is dying because of this.
That's it.
Uh,
We lost the humanity in that. And, I think that kind of comes full circle to everything we talked about, is the people longing to see a sense of humanity, a sense of somebody that puts emphasis on the right things. And no offense to the Kardashians, but I wanted to have something that was real. And real means sometimes that it's not pretty, it's ugly, it's vulnerable. And that is okay with me. I would rather have that humanity shown than be a false sense of perfection.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that was probably one of the quickest hours I think I've ever felt on the show. I can't believe, I don't even know where that hour went. But like, Alina, tell us, like, what's next? Obviously you've had such a storied career. What's next for, what's the next chapter maybe?
Yeah, that's great to think about. I wish I had a solid answer for you, but I'm working on a couple of projects. I do hope to return to television. I will say that. And in the meantime, like, I'm doing what everybody else is doing, working a 9 to 5 job so that I get health care and pay my rent. But TV is really, I didn't know that it was going to be my passion, and it really is. I like communicating the good parts of humanity to a broader audience. I hope that that's what's happened. I hope that's what resonates with people. I hope that they feel a little bit more knowledgeable about making decisions, that they think a little more critically of things that they encounter, whether it's a news story or a crime.
Yeah.
And I want to continue doing that.
Yeah, well, look, that sounds amazing. I hope to hear more. Hope to see you back on TV maybe for another season, or segueing into some other show would be brilliant. Because I think you're just a bastion of knowledge. Again, really easy to talk to. Really good at explaining. I can see that kind of educator coming out, and you're really simplifying stuff. I think I could have asked any question, you would have been able to come back with an answer, which is a joy of a guest, really. So, look, thanks so much for giving up your time. I really appreciate it. I know the listeners will appreciate it. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Brilliant. And that's it. Who knows? We might run it back again one someday.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it again.
Thanks, Emil. Cheers.
You too.